In recent weeks, international observers have sounded increasingly urgent warnings about North Korea's growing capacity to destabilize the global order. What was once regarded as a contained regional issue has now become a matter of worldwide concern. According to our sources, intelligence agencies and policy experts no longer debate whether Pyongyang possesses the capability to threaten global security. The question, they say, is how soon its actions might trigger a crisis that reverberates across economies, alliances, and societies far beyond the Korean peninsula. Analysts point out that the country's nuclear and missile programs, once dismissed as rudimentary, have advanced with alarming speed. Reports from defense specialists indicate that testing cycles are more frequent, and the range of missiles has extended to targets once considered safe from North Korea's reach. While official statements from Pyongyang frame these activities as defensive measures, experts in security circles quietly stress that the underlying message is clear. North Korea is determined to be recognized as a strategic power capable of influencing global dynamics. The implications extend far beyond military concerns. Energy markets, shipping routes, and financial stability are all sensitive to geopolitical risks in East Asia. Observers underline that each missile launch, each aggressive statement, sparks turbulence in global markets. Investors react with caution, supply chains adapt to uncertainty, and governments prepare contingency plans. Even countries geographically distant from the peninsula are affected by the ripple effects. The threat is not confined to borders. It is systemic, touching multiple aspects of the interconnected global economy. Behind closed doors, policymakers in Western capitals admit to growing frustration. Diplomatic efforts aimed at denuclearization have stalled, while sanctions appear to have limited impact. According to insiders, Pyongyang has become adept at maneuvering around restrictions, relying on networks of covert trade, cyber operations, and strategic partnerships. This adaptability challenges the assumption that isolation could weaken the regime. Instead, North Korea has demonstrated resilience, using pressure as proof of its ability to endure and, by extension, to escalate if provoked. Experts also emphasize the symbolic dimension of North Korea's actions. Each test, each declaration, sends a message not only to regional rivals, but to the global community. The state remains unpredictable and willing to defy international norms. Observers warn that this unpredictability is itself a weapon. By maintaining an atmosphere of uncertainty, Pyongyang forces other nations to divert resources, attention, and political capital toward managing a perpetual crisis. This dynamic, analysts argue, grants North Korea an outsized influence compared to its size or economic power. For citizens across the world, the consequences may seem distant. Yet the globalized nature of today's systems ensures that instability in one region quickly reverberates elsewhere. From higher energy prices to volatile stock markets, the effects of North Korea's behavior are tangible. Security specialists caution that the more frequent and advanced these provocations become, the greater the likelihood of miscalculation. And in the realm of nuclear strategy, even a small misstep could have catastrophic consequences. In this environment of heightened tension, staying informed is essential. Understanding the dynamics behind North Korea's strategy is not only a matter for military experts, but for anyone affected by economic uncertainty and political instability. Subscribe to the channel to follow the unfolding analysis and grasp how these developments may shape the future security landscape of the entire world. When examining North Korea's ability to challenge global stability, experts often begin with its unconventional approach to power. Unlike traditional states that rely on economic strength or diplomatic alliances, Pyongyang leverages unpredictability as its main tool. According to our sources, this unpredictability is not accidental, but carefully cultivated. Each missile launch, cyber attack, or aggressive statement is designed to keep rivals uncertain and reactive. Analysts describe this as strategic ambiguity, a method that magnifies North Korea's influence far beyond its actual resources. Observers highlight that the regime's nuclear program is central to this strategy. While the exact size of the arsenal remains unclear, defense experts cautiously note that its capabilities are no longer in doubt. Recent satellite imagery and intelligence assessments suggest ongoing development of warheads designed for greater mobility and survivability. This means that any attempt to neutralize the threat through preemptive measures would carry extreme risks. The mere possibility of retaliation, even if limited, alters the calculations of regional and global powers. Beyond the military dimension, North Korea's actions increasingly intersect with economic and technological domains. Cybersecurity specialists warn that the state has developed sophisticated hacking units capable of targeting financial institutions, cryptocurrency exchanges, and critical infrastructure abroad. According to insiders, such operations serve dual purposes, generating revenue for the regime and demonstrating its ability to inflict disruption without physical conflict. In expert circles, it is carefully observed that these cyber activities create a new layer of uncertainty, extending the country's reach into global financial systems. Sanctions, once considered the primary tool for pressuring Pyongyang, have yielded limited results. Analysts quietly acknowledge that North Korea has adapted, using clandestine trade routes, intermediaries, and alternative financing methods to mitigate their impact. This adaptability complicates international efforts, leaving policymakers with few effective options. Observers caution that repeated rounds of sanctions, when they fail to achieve intended outcomes, may even strengthen the regime's narrative of resilience against foreign pressure. Diplomatic efforts remain fragile. Negotiations, when they occur, often stall quickly, with each side unwilling to make concessions. According to our sources, Western governments privately admit that expectations of rapid progress were unrealistic. Pyongyang, meanwhile, has mastered the art of using talks as leverage, gaining temporary relief or recognition without altering its strategic course. Experts emphasize that this pattern has become predictable. Moments of apparent openness followed by renewed confrontation. For neighboring countries, the stakes are especially high. South Korea, Japan, and China each face distinct challenges, from defense readiness to economic exposure. In financial markets, even rumors of escalation can trigger fluctuations in currencies, equities, and commodity prices. Shipping routes in East Asia, vital for global trade, remain vulnerable to disruption. Analysts underline that this interconnectedness means North Korea's actions reverberate far beyond its borders, influencing decisions in boardrooms and parliaments worldwide. Internationally, the challenge lies in balancing deterrence with diplomacy. Too much pressure risks provoking escalation, while too little risks emboldening Pyongyang. Insiders note that this delicate balance explains the cautious tone of official statements, which often emphasize both firmness and openness. Yet behind the careful words lies deep frustration, as policymakers recognize the limited effectiveness of existing strategies. Taken together, these dynamics suggest that North Korea's threat is multidimensional: military, economic, technological, and psychological. Analysts caution that treating it solely as a nuclear issue overlooks the broader strategy of disruption. The country's ability to exploit uncertainty has become a defining feature of global security discussions, ensuring that its influence extends far beyond its borders or resources. Within security communities, discussions about North Korea increasingly revolve around its evolving doctrine rather than just its weapons. According to our sources, the regime has demonstrated a clear pattern: combined displays of military power with calculated periods of negotiation, alternating pressure and relief. Experts note that this rhythm keeps adversaries off balance, forcing them to respond rather than set the agenda. It is a strategy that magnifies influence, allowing a relatively small state to command disproportionate attention in global forums. Observers highlight that Pyongyang's recent activities go beyond traditional missile launches. Intelligence assessments suggest continued work on submarine-based systems, mobile launch platforms, and more sophisticated warheads. Analysts cautiously underline that these developments complicate any effort to contain the threat, as they enhance survivability and expand potential targets. The message, insiders explain, is deliberate. North Korea seeks to demonstrate that it cannot be coerced or ignored. Economic dimensions add another layer of complexity. Sanctions have restricted official trade, but parallel channels remain active. According to insiders, networks of intermediaries operate through neighboring states, enabling Pyongyang to access technology, fuel, and resources despite international restrictions. This adaptability underscores the regime's resilience. Experts quietly observe that sanctions alone, without broader strategies, may not be sufficient to alter behavior. Instead, they risk entrenching a narrative of defiance that the leadership uses to rally domestic support. Cyber capabilities extend the scope of threat into new domains. Specialists report that state-sponsored units have successfully targeted financial institutions across multiple continents, extracting funds and testing the defenses of critical infrastructure. These operations, often attributed to Pyongyang-linked groups, serve as a reminder that North Korea's influence is not limited by geography. By leveraging digital tools, the regime projects power globally, bypassing the physical constraints of its borders. Analysts stress that this dimension of the threat is often underestimated, even as it becomes more pronounced. The psychological impact of North Korea's strategy is equally significant. Each provocation, whether a missile test or a cyber attack, reinforces the perception of unpredictability. Observers argue that this unpredictability is itself a form of deterrence, creating hesitation among adversaries who fear unintended escalation. It forces powerful nations to act cautiously, knowing that even a miscalculation could have severe consequences. In this way, Pyongyang has transformed uncertainty into a strategic asset. For citizens worldwide, the implications are indirect but real. Volatile markets, disrupted supply chains, and heightened regional tensions affect economies far removed from the Korean peninsula. Shipping routes critical for global trade pass through nearby waters, and investors closely watch developments for signs of instability. Analysts warn that the more frequent these disruptions become, the more normalized they appear. A troubling trend that masks the seriousness of the underlying threat. Diplomatic options remain constrained. Efforts to restart meaningful dialogue often falter over preconditions, with each side demanding concessions the other will not provide. According to insiders, negotiators recognize that progress is unlikely without shifts in strategy, yet political realities limit flexibility. In this environment, stalemate becomes the norm, while North Korea continues to advance its programs. Experts caution that waiting for spontaneous change may be unrealistic. Proactive approaches may be required, though they carry their own risks. The broader lesson, analysts suggest, is that North Korea has mastered the art of leveraging limited resources into global influence. Its weapons may be fewer than those of major powers, but its strategy ensures they command attention. Its economy may be small, but its disruptions resonate across global systems. This imbalance between capacity and impact is precisely what makes the threat so enduring. Understanding these dynamics is crucial for interpreting not only regional tensions, but also shifts in global security. Subscribe to the channel to stay informed about how North Korea's strategy is evolving and what it may mean for the stability of the international system. According to our sources, recent intelligence briefings in Western capitals have emphasized that North Korea's threat cannot be understood in isolation. It is closely intertwined with broader geopolitical rivalries, particularly as global powers recalibrate their strategies in Asia. Analysts note that Pyongyang benefits from these rivalries by positioning itself as a factor that must be managed rather than eliminated. This creates space for maneuver, where even limited concessions or symbolic gestures can yield disproportionate attention. Observers highlight that the regime's diplomacy often exploits divisions among major powers. When relations between Washington and Beijing are strained, or when Tokyo and Seoul disagree on regional security, North Korea leverages these gaps. Insiders explain that Pyongyang has long recognized the value of playing larger states against one another, ensuring that no unified front can emerge. In expert circles, this strategy is described as a form of geopolitical judo, using the weight of rivals to maintain balance and relevance. The military dimension continues to evolve. Recent reports suggest that North Korea has conducted exercises designed to simulate rapid mobilization in the event of conflict. Analysts emphasize that these drills, even if limited in scale, serve dual purposes. They test capabilities and send signals. Each exercise demonstrates readiness, reinforcing the perception that Pyongyang is prepared to act unpredictably. Observers caution that such signaling, while intended to deter, also increases the risk of miscalculation. In tense environments, even minor incidents can escalate unexpectedly. Economic resilience remains another point of concern. Despite decades of sanctions, the regime has maintained stability through a combination of strict domestic control and external support from informal networks. According to insiders, underground trade routes and cyber operations provide critical resources. Experts underline that this resilience undermines the effectiveness of international measures, leaving policymakers frustrated by the lack of leverage. In financial discussions, it is quietly acknowledged that sanctions fatigue is setting in, with some states questioning their long-term utility. The humanitarian dimension further complicates the picture. International organizations continue to report shortages of food, medicine, and infrastructure within North Korea. Yet the regime channels resources into its military and strategic programs. Observers warn that this prioritization not only exacerbates suffering, but also reinforces the regime's narrative of resistance. By framing deprivation as a consequence of foreign hostility, the leadership consolidates domestic loyalty. Analysts stress that this dynamic makes external pressure less effective, as hardships are portrayed as evidence of national strength. Global markets remain sensitive to developments on the Korean peninsula. A single missile test can influence oil prices, shipping insurance rates, and investor sentiment. Economists point out that while the direct economic ties between North Korea and the rest of the world are limited, the indirect consequences are far-reaching. This paradox, a relatively isolated economy generating global disruption, illustrates the unique nature of the threat. Insiders describe it as asymmetry, small inputs producing large outputs precisely because the stakes are so high. Diplomatic channels remain fragile. Efforts to restart negotiations are complicated by deep mistrust on all sides. Officials privately admit that talks are often pursued more for appearances than for genuine progress. Analysts suggest that this lack of sincerity creates a cycle of disappointment, where expectations are raised and quickly dashed. Over time, this erodes faith in diplomacy as a tool, leaving military deterrence as the default approach. Observers warn that this narrowing of options increases risks for the entire region. Taken together, these dynamics depict a situation where North Korea thrives in uncertainty. Its ability to exploit rivalries, withstand pressure, and project power disproportionate to its size ensures that the threat remains unresolved. Experts underline that this persistence, more than any single act, is what makes Pyongyang a destabilizing force. The world adjusts to each new provocation, but the cumulative effect is a steady erosion of stability. Experts emphasize that the future trajectory of North Korea's threat will depend on how the international community responds to its evolving strategy. According to our sources, policymakers are weighing three broad approaches. The first is to intensify pressure through tighter sanctions and military deterrence, in the hope of forcing compliance. The second is to pursue engagement, offering incentives for cooperation and gradual change. The third is a hybrid path, combining firmness with selective dialogue. Each option carries risks, and none offers certainty. Analysts caution that relying solely on pressure may backfire. The regime has proven resilient under isolation, adapting through covert trade, cyber operations, and domestic control. Additional sanctions may deepen suffering without altering strategic choices. Conversely, engagement risks being exploited, with Pyongyang accepting concessions while continuing its programs. The hybrid model, while pragmatic, struggles with internal contradictions, as signals of openness are often undermined by acts of defiance. Insiders quietly admit that no strategy has yet demonstrated lasting success. From a military perspective, deterrence remains central. Regional powers maintain strong defense postures, conducting exercises and deploying advanced systems to reassure allies and signal readiness. Yet experts underline that deterrence alone cannot resolve underlying tensions. The risk of miscalculation persists, particularly in an environment where signals are ambiguous and intentions uncertain. Observers warn that even a minor clash could escalate rapidly, with consequences far beyond the peninsula. Economically, the paradox endures. A small, isolated state continues to influence global markets. Each missile launch or aggressive statement ripples through commodities, currencies, and investor confidence. Shipping routes vital for international trade remain exposed to disruption. In this sense, North Korea's threat extends beyond its borders, shaping global dynamics through perception as much as through direct action. Analysts describe this as the psychology of instability, where fear of escalation creates tangible effects. The humanitarian situation inside the country remains dire, yet the leadership prioritizes strategic projects over basic needs. International aid efforts face strict restrictions, limiting their reach. Observers suggest that this imbalance reflects the regime's long-term calculation. Survival depends less on domestic welfare than on projecting strength abroad. By cultivating the image of defiance, the state reinforces its legitimacy internally, even at the cost of widespread hardship. For the global community, the dilemma is stark. Ignoring North Korea is impossible. Confronting it directly is dangerous, and accommodating it is unsatisfactory. This enduring dilemma ensures that the issue remains unresolved, occupying space on the agenda of every major international forum. Experts stress that this persistence, rather than any single act, constitutes the real threat, a constant, unresolved tension that destabilizes the global system. Looking forward, analysts underline that awareness will be critical. North Korea's strategy thrives in ambiguity, using uncertainty as a tool. Recognizing patterns, understanding motives, and anticipating consequences are essential to avoiding missteps. The challenge is not only to manage immediate provocations, but to prepare for the long-term implications of a state that has embedded instability into its very identity. In such an environment, staying informed becomes more than a matter of curiosity. It is a necessity. Subscribe to the channel to follow the evolving analysis, uncover the hidden dynamics behind North Korea's actions, and understand how this small state continues to cast such a large shadow over global security.